They called me the family ATM, until I proved I could run the bank too. I used to think helping family was the right thing to do. I'm Evelyn Hart, 34 years old, an accountant living in Missouri. Numbers always made sense to me, people didn't. My mother, Diane, used to brag to her friends that I was the smart one with a good job. What she left out was how often she came to me when her credit card was maxed out or when she forgot to pay a bill. My brother Caleb was worse. Every month there was a new crisis, a broken car, a late rent payment, a surprise doctor's visit for his daughter. His wife, Marla, always sounded sweet on the phone when she asked, "Ev, could you help us just this once?" Somehow, just this once turned into years. At first, I didn't mind. I loved my family and wanted them to be comfortable. I covered Caleb's wedding when his savings ran out. I paid for Mom's medical bills when her insurance lapsed. I even helped send my niece to a private school because I believed education mattered. Everyone called me the responsible one. They said it with pride, and I believed that meant I was doing something good. But little by little, I noticed something change. The gratitude faded. Thank you calls turned into casual texts that sounded more like orders. Transfer $300 when you can. Card isn't working. Can you fix it? They stopped asking, and I stopped saying no. It became normal. I was the steady paycheck that kept everyone afloat. The moment I realized something was wrong came one quiet Sunday afternoon. I was on the phone with Mom, and she mentioned Caleb wanted to buy a new truck. I laughed and said he should probably wait until he paid off the old one. She went silent for a moment and then said, almost sharply, "You worry too much, Ev. You can help him if he needs it." Something in her tone made my stomach turn. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an expectation. After that call, I sat in my small kitchen staring at my budget spreadsheet. Every number told a story, and that day, the story was ugly. I'd spent more money on my family that year than on myself. I hadn't taken a vacation in 4 years. I was still renting a modest apartment while Caleb lived in a house with a new deck, the same one I had unknowingly paid for. I felt stupid at first. Then I felt angry. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was the way they looked at me like a resource, not a person. I had worked hard for everything I had, and they treated it like a bottomless well. My smile at family dinners had become a mask, hiding the quiet rage underneath. I told myself things would change, but deep down I knew they wouldn't. Not until I made them. It started small, like most bad habits do. The first time I gave my brother money, it was for his wedding. Caleb had proposed to Marla, and they wanted something simple but elegant. Somehow, that turned into me paying for the venue deposit, the photographer, and even part of Marla's dress. I told myself it was a gift, something a loving sister would do. When they thanked me, they said, "You're just so responsible, Ev. We're lucky to have you." I didn't realize then that responsible was just another word for available. A few months later, my mom had a surgery, and her insurance didn't cover everything. She cried on the phone, said she hated asking, but there was no one else to turn to. I wired the money without thinking twice. I felt proud that I could help, that my job made it possible. But soon the calls started coming more often, a late payment here, a car repair there. Every time, there was a reason that sounded urgent, and every time, I opened my wallet. Then came the request for my niece's school tuition. Caleb said, "It's just until we get back on our feet." I paid the first semester, then the next. By the third, it wasn't even discussed. It was just assumed I'd take care of it. The first time I said no, everything changed. Mom called me selfish. Caleb told me I was letting family down. Even Marla sent a long message about how hard life was for parents. I tried to explain that I was saving for my own home, but no one listened. The guilt hit me like a wave. I caved and sent the money, hating myself a little for it. That Thanksgiving, the tension was thick enough to taste. The table was crowded, the air warm with food and fake smiles. Caleb joked that I should carve the turkey since I paid for half the groceries. Everyone laughed except me. Mom raised her glass and said, "To our Evelyn, the glue that holds us together." I smiled because I was supposed to. But inside, I felt something crack. When the meal was over, my boyfriend Marcus found me in the kitchen washing dishes. He didn't have to ask what was wrong. He already knew. He wiped his hands on a towel and said quietly, "You know they're using you, right?" I tried to defend them, said they just needed help, that it was family. He shook his head. "No, Ev. Family helps you back. This isn't that." I stood there with my hands in the soapy water, unable to argue. For years, I had been buying their comfort while losing mine. Marcus put a hand on my shoulder and said, "You can't keep doing this. One day, there won't be anything left of you to give." That night, lying beside him, his words kept echoing in my head. I realized he was right, and the thought terrified me. I remember the day my mom asked me to co-sign the loan like it was yesterday. She said it so casually, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Caleb needed a new car, she explained, and the bank wouldn't approve him a loan. "It's just a formality," she said. "You won't even have to worry about it." I hesitated, told her I didn't feel comfortable, that I'd worked too hard to keep my credit clean. She sighed into the phone, and I could almost hear the disappointment dripping from her voice. "Ev, you know your brother's had a rough time. You've always been the one who steps up. I thought you'd understand." That one sentence was all it took. I felt the same familiar guilt rise up, and I agreed. I told myself it was fine. Caleb would make the payments, and it would barely affect me. For a few months, everything seemed okay. Then I started getting calls from the bank. Missed payments. Late fees. Notices I didn't understand at first. When I called Caleb, he brushed it off. "I'm handling it, Ev. Just a mix-up." It wasn't a mix-up. He stopped paying altogether, and I was left with the damage. My credit score dropped so fast it made my stomach hurt. I had been saving for a down payment on my first home, something I'd dreamed about for years. When I met with the lender, they told me my credit was too low to qualify. I remember sitting in the office, my throat tight, trying to smile at the woman behind the desk while I felt everything inside me crumble. That night, I called Mom. I told her what had happened, that Caleb's loan had destroyed my chances of buying a home. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "You'll recover, honey. Money comes easy for you." I couldn't believe she said that. Money comes easy for me? I worked every day, every weekend, every late night to keep everything running. None of it had ever been easy. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time. The apartment felt colder than usual. I looked around at my furniture, the stacks of bills on the counter, the empty walls. That line, "Money comes easy for you," stuck in my head like a knife that wouldn't come out. Something inside me shifted that night. I opened my laptop and began checking every account that had my name on it. There were more than I remembered. Shared cards, joint savings, automatic transfers. I traced each transaction line by line, and what I found made me sick. Charges I didn't make. Transfers labeled gift. Payments to stores I'd never been to. They hadn't just used me for help. They'd been taking from me without even asking. Every number on that screen felt like another lie. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dark, feeling my anger start to burn slow and steady, the kind that doesn't fade. After that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those numbers. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to know the full truth. I had spent years working with numbers for other people, fixing their mistakes, keeping everything balanced. Now, for the first time, I was doing it for myself. I sat at my desk with a notebook, my laptop open, and every bank statement spread out in front of me. I checked each account carefully, one by one. At first, I thought maybe it was a few small mistakes, something I could sort out. But the deeper I went, the worse it got. There were charges for a luxury spa in St. Louis, hotel stays, expensive dinners, and electronics I'd never bought. One credit card showed payments for a trip to Florida. I didn't even know they'd gone. When I looked at my mother's account, I found transfers labeled "Gift from Ev." The words made my stomach turn. She hadn't even tried to hide it. I could picture her at her computer, typing my name into the note like it was nothing. I sat there in silence, staring at the screen, waiting to feel the tears come. But they didn't. I wasn't sad anymore. I was done. That night, I didn't yell or call anyone. I didn't throw things or cry. I just started working. I closed the shared savings account first, then froze every card that had my name tied to theirs. I opened new accounts in my name only, set up new passwords, and updated every login. Every move I made was quiet and careful. I knew that if I acted out of anger, I'd make mistakes. This wasn't about revenge yet. It was about protection. The next few days, I kept up my normal routine. I still called Mom to check in, still texted Caleb when he asked about a few bills. I answered calmly, pretending nothing had changed. At work, my coworkers joked and chatted while I stayed focused, hiding what I was really doing. Between meetings, I called banks, spoke to credit agencies, and slowly built a wall between me and them. Each time I locked something down, I felt lighter. My heart didn't race anymore when I checked my phone. My savings started to look like mine again, untouched, unclaimed. It wasn't joy I felt, not yet, but a kind of peace I hadn't known in years. By the end of the week, I had separated almost everything. The only thing left were the joint cards that Caleb still used, but I already knew what I'd do about those. I saved every document, every record, in a hidden folder on my laptop. I had proof now, and for the first time, I was the one in control. I looked at the screen one last time before shutting it down. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. They had taken enough from me. Now it was my turn to act. The morning of my niece's birthday felt calm, almost too calm. I woke up early, made a cup of coffee, and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. The plan was ready, and I knew exactly what to do. My heart didn't pound, my hands didn't shake. I felt strangely steady, like I was about to finish a long job that had taken years to complete. One by one, I logged into every account that had my name on it. I froze them all. The joint savings with Mom, locked. The credit card Caleb used, canceled. The family emergency fund that I had been tricked into setting up, shut down completely. Then I called the banks and reported several transactions as fraud. The representatives on the phone were polite, asking the same questions over and over. I answered calmly, with a notebook beside me. When it was done, I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. Everything was frozen. I dressed carefully for the party, choosing a blue dress that made me look bright and friendly. I even bought a small gift for my niece, a storybook she'd wanted. On the drive over, I kept replaying what might happen in my head. I didn't plan to start a fight, but I also wasn't going to help anyone anymore. When I arrived, the house was full of laughter and balloons. Marla greeted me at the door, smiling wide, her tone sugary sweet. "Ev, you made it. She's going to love seeing you." I smiled back and handed her the gift. Inside, Caleb was at the kitchen counter arranging the cake, a big one with pink icing and candles shaped like stars. Mom was there too, busy taking photos with her phone. Everything felt normal until the moment they tried to pay for the cake. Caleb pulled out his card and handed it to the cashier. A few seconds later, the woman behind the counter frowned and said, "Sorry, sir. It's declined." Caleb laughed awkwardly and tried another card. Same result. He looked confused, then annoyed. Mom turned toward me. "Evelyn, can you check if something's wrong with the bank?" she asked. Her voice carried that familiar edge, not a request, but an order. I met her eyes and smiled. "Everything's fine with the bank," I said softly. "It's just your accounts aren't open anymore." For a moment, no one spoke. Caleb's face turned red. Marla blinked, trying to process what I'd said. "What do you mean not open?" Caleb snapped. I picked up a slice of cake for my niece and handed it to her. I said quietly, "The ATM is closed." The room went still. Even the music seemed to fade. Mom's expression shifted from confusion to shock. Caleb muttered a curse under his breath, grabbing his phone and stepping aside to call the bank. I watched him pacing, angry, while I helped my niece light her candles. When she blew them out, everyone clapped, except them. They were too busy realizing that the money train had stopped. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I just felt free. The room went from noisy to silent in seconds. Caleb stood by the counter, gripping his phone so hard his knuckles turned white. He was shouting at someone from the bank, demanding answers, while Marla hovered behind him, whispering, "There must be a mistake." Mom's face was tight, her lips pressed into a thin line as she stared at me. When Caleb hung up, he turned toward me, his eyes full of anger. "They said all the accounts are frozen. What the hell did you do, Evelyn?" His voice was sharp enough to cut through the chatter. A few parents nearby turned to look. I didn't flinch. I just stood there holding a paper plate, watching him unravel. Mom stepped forward next, her voice rising. "You picked today? Your niece's birthday? How could you be so cruel?" She looked at me like I'd done something unforgivable, like I was the one who ruined everything. I kept my tone calm. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped paying for it. Her jaw dropped. Caleb's face flushed red. "You can't just freeze everything," he yelled. "We need that money. You can't do this to us." "I didn't do this to you," I said quietly. "You did it to yourselves." The words hit like a slap. The room felt heavier, quieter, the only sound coming from my niece giggling with her friends in the next room, unaware of the storm brewing around her. Marla stepped between us, trying to sound reasonable. "Ev, come on. Let's not make a scene. We're family. We can figure this out later." She was smiling, but her voice shook. "Just unlock it for now. You can talk to the bank tomorrow." I looked at her, then at Caleb, who was glaring at me like I was the enemy. "It's already figured out," I said. "I fixed it permanently." That line hung in the air. Mom blinked at me, confused, as if she didn't understand what permanently meant. Caleb muttered something under his breath, pacing like a caged animal. I saw the realization settle in his eyes. He no longer had access to anything. The control they'd had over me was gone, and they knew it. Mom tried again, her voice breaking this time. "Evelyn, please, this isn't you. You don't do things like this." She was wrong. This was me, just not the version they could use anymore. I placed my plate down on the table and turned toward the door. "Enjoy the rest of the party," I said softly. No one followed me as I walked out. I could feel their eyes on my back, heavy with anger and disbelief. Outside, the air felt cool against my skin. I stood there for a moment, listening to the muffled noise from inside. Caleb shouting again, Mom crying, Marla trying to calm them both. Then I walked to my car. Each step felt lighter than the last. For years, they'd held my life in their hands, and I hadn't even noticed. Now, finally, they were the ones scrambling, and I was the one in control. The days after the party were strangely quiet. My phone didn't stop buzzing at first. Calls, messages, voicemails, all from my family. Caleb's texts came in one after another, filled with anger. "You went too far. Fix this now. You're destroying us." I didn't reply to any of them. Mom's messages were softer at first, full of confusion. "Why are you doing this? You're breaking my heart." Then they turned into guilt. "After all I've done for you, this is how you treat me?" I muted my phone and left it on the counter. For years, I had jumped every time it rang. Now, I let it buzz until it went silent. 3 days later, someone knocked on my door. I already knew who it was. When I opened it, Mom stood there with tears streaking her face. She looked smaller somehow, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Evelyn, please, I need to talk to you. I'm going to lose the house if you don't fix this." I let her in, but I didn't hug her. She sat on the couch, holding her hands together like she was praying. "The bank called," she said softly. "They said the payments stopped, and I can't make them on my own. You can't let me lose my home." For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. She had lived there for years, decorating it with flowers, calling it her house. I had paid every mortgage bill, every repair, every tax. Slowly, I said, "Mom, that's not your house. It's mine. The mortgage was always in my name. You've been living in my house." She stared at me like she didn't understand the words. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That can't be true." "It is," I said quietly. "I didn't take your home away. You just never realized it wasn't yours." Her tears came harder after that. She stood up, pacing, saying I'd betrayed her. But I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt empty. I told her gently that I couldn't help her anymore, that I needed to take care of my own life now. She begged me to think about family, to remember everything we'd shared. I didn't remind her how much I'd given. There was no point. When she left, the apartment felt still again. I closed the door and leaned against it, my hands shaking slightly. Then my phone lit up, Caleb calling. I answered once, just to hear what he'd say. He didn't hold back. He shouted that I'd ruined their lives, that I'd made them look like fools, that I'd turned my back on blood. His voice was full of rage, but underneath I could hear fear. When he paused to breathe, I said quietly, "You did this to yourself, Caleb." Then I hung up and blocked his number. That night, for the first time in years, I slept through the night without waking up once. No guilt, no buzzing phone, just silence and peace. The next week, I finally decided it was time to make everything official. Freezing accounts wasn't enough anymore. I needed to make sure they could never touch my name or my money again. I found a local attorney named Claire Benson, a woman who looked calm and confident, the kind of person who didn't waste words. When I sat across from her in her office, I told her everything. How I had supported my family for years, how they'd used my accounts, and how I'd recently discovered the transfers I never approved. Claire listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "You've done more than most people ever would. Now it's time to protect yourself legally." She asked for my financial records, and I handed her the thick folder I'd brought. She went through every page with sharp eyes, highlighting transactions and writing notes. After a while, she looked up and said quietly, "There's more here than you realize." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" She turned her laptop toward me. "These aren't just unauthorized charges. Someone used your social security number to open credit lines. See this?" She pointed to a document. A store card under your name. Another personal loan. Both opened 2 years ago. I felt my chest tighten as I read the names. Caleb and Marla listed as authorized users. My hands started to shake. They hadn't just borrowed money from me. They'd stolen my identity. Claire looked at me carefully. You can press charges for identity theft, she said. It's your legal right. The thought made me feel sick. I didn't want to drag my family into court. It felt too heavy, too final. They're still my family, I said softly. I just want them out of my life. Claire nodded. I understand. But remember, they broke the law, not you. She slid the papers toward me. You can take your time to decide. That night, I told Marcus everything. He listened quietly while I spoke, his face serious. When I said I wasn't sure if I could go through with it, he shook his head. Ev, they didn't just take your money. They took your trust. That's worse. I sat there, staring at the table, hearing his words echo in my mind. He was right. I had spent years letting them walk over me because I couldn't stand the thought of hurting them. But they hadn't cared about hurting me. They had lied, stolen, and smiled in my face while doing it. The next morning, I went back to Claire's office. She was waiting with the papers ready. My hands didn't tremble this time when I picked up the pen. Signing my name felt like closing a door that had been left open too long. When it was done, Claire smiled gently and said, You just took your life back. For the first time, I believed it. Months passed, and life began to feel normal again. My phone stayed quiet. No more sudden messages asking for money, no fake emergencies. I went to work, came home, and enjoyed the simple calm that used to feel impossible. Sometimes I caught myself waiting for the next problem, but it never came. One afternoon, I opened my mailbox and found a letter from the county. It was addressed to me because the mortgage had always been under my name. The letter said the house had been sold. My family had finally let it go. I read it twice, slowly, then folded it and set it on the table. I didn't feel joy or anger, just a strange stillness. A few days later, a neighbor from my mom's old street called. She mentioned that Mom and Caleb had moved into a small rental on the other side of town. It's not much, she said, but they're managing. I thanked her and hung up. I sat for a long while after that, thinking about all the years I'd carried them, how they'd lived comfortably while I scraped by. Now they knew what that weight felt like, the worry, the stress, the helplessness. They were finally living the life they'd handed me for so long. That night, I got a voicemail from Mom. Her voice was soft and broken. Ev, I don't know what to say. I know I can't fix it. I just hope someday you can forgive me. She didn't ask for money this time. Not once. Just forgiveness. I listened to it twice, maybe 3 times. Her voice cracked near the end, and I could tell she'd been crying. For a moment, I almost called her back. My thumb hovered over the phone, but I didn't press it. Some things can't be repaired with a phone call. Instead, the next morning, I drove out to the lake near my apartment. It was quiet there, with water so still it looked like glass. I brought a small envelope with me. Inside were the last reminders of the life I'd left behind. Old joint account cards, bank statements, a photo of the house. I sat on a bench for a while, listening to the birds and the soft sound of water moving against the shore. Then, one by one, I dropped the cards into the lake. They made small splashes before sinking out of sight. I watched until the water was calm again. It felt like closing a book that had taken too long to read. The air was cool, and the wind brushed my hair back. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. I didn't think about revenge or regret, just peace. I stood there until the sun started to set, then turned and walked back to my car. The world felt quiet, and for once it was enough. Life slowly found a rhythm again. I moved into a small condo on the edge of town, bright and quiet, with big windows that let in the morning light. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, every inch of it. There were no shared accounts, no secret transfers, no one depending on me but myself. Each bill I paid was mine alone, and somehow that made everything feel lighter. At work, I threw myself into my job. The focus paid off when my boss called me into her office one afternoon to tell me I was being promoted. She said she admired how calm and steady I was under pressure. I smiled and thanked her, thinking about how different that calmness felt now. It wasn't the quiet of someone holding back anger anymore. It was peace. Marcus and I grew closer through it all. He was patient, never pushing me to talk about what happened, just letting me breathe. One evening, we sat on the balcony watching the sunset. The sky was streaked with soft colors, and the air smelled like rain. He turned to me and asked, "Do you ever regret it?" Cutting them off. I thought about his question for a while before answering. No, I said finally. I just wish they'd seen me as family before they saw me as finance. He nodded, understanding without another word. We sat in silence for a long time, just listening to the quiet city below us. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. I felt balanced. Later that night, after Marcus had gone home, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I logged into my new bank account, the one no one else knew about. The numbers glowed on the screen, steady and safe. Every cent there had come from my work, my choices, my effort. No one could touch it now. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the balance for a moment. It wasn't just money I'd protected. It was my life, my boundaries, my peace. I whispered softly, almost to myself, no more withdrawals. Then I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and stood by the window. The night outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels earned. I wasn't angry anymore, or sad, or even proud. I was just free. And that, after everything, was enough. Do you think Evelyn made the right choice by cutting her family off, or should she have forgiven them and tried again? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories like this.